This is part 2 of week 1. What is mindfulness? Over the past few years, we've witnessed an explosion of interest in mindfulness in fields as diverse as mental health, medicine, business, neuroscience, education, police, and even military. However, this rapid growth has led to less and less qualified teachers claiming expertise in mindfulness. And it's for this reason that I'd like to spend a few minutes here reviewing how mindfulness is understood in Buddhism. Since this is a training in self-compassion, I also want to be really clear about the relationship between mindfulness and self-compassion. In the many years I've spent studying with Thich Nhat Hanh, I've learned that it is impossible to separate mindfulness and self-compassion. As he would say, you can't have true mindfulness without compassion. And compassion always begins with compassion for oneself. Before discussing the meaning of mindfulness, I want to be really clear about the importance of not getting caught up in semantics. There's a strong current in Buddhism about not being attached to particular forms or words, but instead staying focused on the reality that those words are attempting to describe. In general semantics, there's a saying that the map is not the territory. In other words, a description can never completely describe the actual thing. Similarly, in Buddhism, there's a famous discourse in which the Buddha compares his teachings to a finger pointing at the moon. He says, if you focus too much on the finger, you're going to miss the moon. The whole purpose of the finger is to get you to have your own direct experience of the moon. And that is to say that any attempt at describing, much less defining, mindfulness should be done carefully. Any description or definition is just an attempt to point to a direct experience of a beneficial state of mind. Try not to get caught up in comparing different definitions, but instead, just try to put them into practice in a way that feels beneficial to you. Thich Nhat Hanh often says that the only way to know if you're practicing correctly is that you're experiencing less suffering and more happiness. We always want to stay open to the possibility that we might have misunderstood some teaching. If a particular teaching doesn't feel helpful to you when you put it into practice, you might try seeing if you could interpret it in a different way, or just let it go and come back to it later. Now, I'll do my best to describe the state of mind that we call mindfulness. First, mindfulness is not the same as bare attention. It's a very particular way of paying attention. It's not cold or neutral, but warm and loving. It is not entirely desireless, but contains the intention to awaken from forgetfulness and embrace your experience. It's often focused on bodily sensations, feelings, or thoughts, but it can focus on any phenomenon. Mindfulness is a translation of the Pali word sati, which literally means to remember. It comes from the Pali word sarati. On the other hand, the Pali word for bare attention is manasikara. To make a long story short, manasikara is considered a universal mental factor, which means some amount of bare attention is present in every waking moment of life. That it only becomes mindfulness or sati under very particular circumstances, which I'll try to explain here. Mindfulness is described in many different ways in Buddhist psychology, and I'll quote from a few sources now. First, the Abhidhamma, written in Pali, is a foundational group of texts that contains stories and practices that the Buddha described in his discourses. The stories are compiled in the Abhidhamma into a theoretical framework. In the Abhidhamma, mindfulness is said to have 18 necessary characteristics. These include love, adoso, generosity, alobo, tranquility, and lightness. When Thich Nhat Hanh describes these characteristics of mindfulness, he uses the image of a mother holding her newborn child. Take a moment to imagine yourself holding a newborn baby. Can you imagine holding this delicate and beautiful child, feeling completely filled with love? Pay special attention to the type of presence and attention that you bring to this experience. Take note of how it feels. There's no fear, no insecurity, no stress. Just complete ease and a willingness to care in whatever way is needed. With this description of mindfulness, Thich Nhat Hanh is inviting us to bring this kind of warmth and tender attention to ourselves and others. We practice cultivating this state of mind, and through practice, our capacity is strengthened. Our mindfulness becomes stronger, and it becomes easier to tap into it throughout the day. So mindfulness is not cold or bare. It is inseparable from love and compassion. Now, it's important that we understand that there are many different forms of mindfulness practice. Some are just about passively observing your experience with warmth and love. We just observe. And others involve reflecting or contemplating our experience in specific ways. They can even be somewhat analytical and still be considered a mindfulness practice. In the original Buddhist discourses, sati, or mindfulness, is almost always presented along with contemplation, sampajana. What this means is that during a mindfulness practice, you might just be observing the sensations in your body with open acceptance, or you might be carefully naming and labeling body sensations. Like saying to yourself, there is tension in my stomach, or there is lightness in my heart. Or you might be paying special attention to the impermanence of your sensations as you watch them arise and fade. These are all different ways of practicing mindfulness that are explicitly taught by the Buddha. You'll have the opportunity to experience many different forms of mindfulness practice throughout this training.